welcome to another edition of the Michigan Recruiting Insider. And boy, things seem like they're getting hotter all the time. Andrew Babalola in the fold. We talked about him last week, and we said the fireworks seems like they're just starting. We talked about how, hey, we were sitting on the ready. I was just waiting to hit send that, maybe some more fireworks were going to happen by the end of that episode. Maybe they'll happen by the end of this episode. Who knows? I was talking about Shamar Earls. I've since put in a crystal ball for Shamar Earls. He hasn't flipped yet, but I put in a crystal ball prediction for him to flip. Will the flip be complete? We'll discuss here on the Recruiting Insider with the best crew in the land, starting with the man, Steve Lorenz. Steve, how are you doing today?
Good, guys. Maybe Michigan can build off of last week's win. Did you see the Oregon the kid that transferred from Michigan State said that Michigan Stadium's not that loud when he's on the field? And it's like, that's because you're on defense. Like, they're not going to be loud when the offense is on the field. Like, I think he carried over that education out to the West Coast. So, kind of a funny little tidbit I just read before we get on here. But, recruiting is, very interesting. A lot different than we're used to, I feel like.
I did not see that at all. Also, Mr. Brice Marich. Brice, how are you?
Solid. This is my first Halloween with a little one, so we are getting ready for that.
So you got anything special going on, Brice?
We're gonna dress up as let's see if I can. What is that? Jurassic Park.
Okay.
The wife said so. The little one's gonna be a little dinosaur, and we're gonna be the gatekeepers. I forgot what they're called, but yeah. So
okay. All right. Well, guys, a lot here in store on this episode, a lot to get to. It is important to note our friends at Wolverine Boots, America's original work boot, our friends over there. I got to tell you, they have hard-working blue-collar apparel. And what am I holding in my hand right now? This sweet commemorative boot. Now, this is not your ordinary work boot. This is a special limited edition work boot, a blue collar work boot. See, this is the 1,000-mile Team 144 commemorative work boot. The 1,000-mile. See, I'm going to hold this up for the camera. Make sure that's in focus. Team 144. I'm trying to hold it right, so it's coming up right. Team 144. There it is. 1,000-mile Team 144 work boot. Now, it's a premium boot for the ultimate Michigan fan. Now, when I got this, they said it was handcrafted, and they gave me the whole description, and they said it was to celebrate the team. And it said, it was a hard-working team that got the job done. And what was the job? To win the national championship. So this boot is meant to be worn, or at least to represent a hard-working individual that is going to get the job done. Comes in this cool box. And if you look at the inside of the box, Wolverines don't stop till the job is finished. And you can see the blue-collar crew at the University of Michigan, the Michigan Athletics. The brand that they represent is the same sort of mindset that you see permeating the Michigan Athletic Department. And as you see all of the student athletes and the NIL representation, as I bring it up on the screen right now, Wolverine has come to represent a mindset over its time as a company, blue collar, synonymous with blue collar and work ethic. And you see that with the Michigan athletic department and the student athletes therein. You see it with the Michigan football program achieving a national championship, blue collar and grit and grinding to a goal. That's what you see with the Wolverine brand. That's what you see with these student athletes. And that's what you see with student athletes across the athletic spectrum. And that's why you see with Wolverine, it's the football athletes, the basketball athletes, the athletes across the athletic spectrum that they support. And right now, if you go to the Wolverine website and you see all the student athletes represented in all the different pieces of apparel, from outerwear to shoes and boots that they represent, you can see the apparel that they wear. It is representative of the brand itself, and so you can also wear that brand too if you go to the Wolverine website. Plenty of discount codes that you can take advantage of right now. You see right there in the upper right-hand corner, you can take an extra 20% off and save and take advantage of that offer that is available to you on the Wolverine website, and take advantage of that. And you can be just like these athletes that represent the Wolverine brand, and just like us here on the Michigan Insider, are the proud representatives and sponsor for us here on the Michigan Insider. And so, guys, as we get into the recruiting side of things, it is a great time to be checking out Michigan recruiting, because I said to you fellas that fireworks seemed like they were on the horizon. Andrew Babalola got them started, and then talked about maybe next on the horizon, it looking like Shamar Earls could be next. He came on a visit last week, fellas. You saw Andrew Marsh. He showed up and he was like, this is my guy. He's looking pretty good. Georgia was trying to get him to not take that visit. They worked him real hard. It was Dante Williams, the DB coach down there, was, why would you want to visit Michigan? Why would you want to go? Don't go on that visit. He came on a visit anyway. And boy, oh boy, guys, it was one of those things where if he was going to go through all that trouble to take the visit, a program that had lost more games, obviously, than Georgia had, if you're going to take that visit anyway, you had to really like Michigan in the first place. Clearly, there was a reason that the Wolverines were feeling really good. And now you see, I'm not the only one that's flipped my crystal ball to the Wolverines. Brian Doan has flipped his crystal ball. And now you see even the Georgia site guys have flipped their crystal ball to the Wolverines as well, Steve.
I think the other thing that trended Michigan, that shows that it's trending Michigan's way, was Georgia actually offering Auburn commitment and one-time Michigan target Donovan Starr. They offered him late this morning, I believe, maybe early afternoon. Usually a good indicator when you see an offer at a position go out like that, that just you put the timing together, usually kind of says a lot about where a school may feel about hanging on to one of their commitments, right? So with all the other buzz and the fact that he came to Michigan and your interview with him, Sam, the tea leaves were already kind of reading one way to begin with, but then you see Georgia almost appearing like they're maybe moving on by offering another kid at the position. I feel like really kind of illustrates where this recruitment is at right now.
Yeah, a fantastic athlete. You talking about 6'2", 208 pounds, Bryce, an inch off the state record in the long jump, I think 25-2, inch off of Noah Lyles, the state record. A tremendous athlete. And if you're Georgia, you got to be like, what in the hell is this? How is he going? Is he possibly thinking about going to Michigan? We're the number 2 team in the country. We got the number 2 or 3 recruiting class. Michigan is outside of the top 25. How in the heck is he even considering Michigan? But it goes back to Bryce. Remember, we had him in the summer. He really vibed with Lamar Morgan. He really forged the bond with Sharon Moore. I mean, it felt like things were trending really heavy to Michigan at that time, and that only by virtue of that Georgia having the visit after Michigan were things able to swing Georgia's way at that point. They had the visit after Michigan. You wonder if the visits were switched around at that time, if things maybe would have gone Michigan's way in the summer. But they had the visit after Michigan, and Georgia was able to get him at that time.
You know, I think the other thing people should look at too is Georgia's stacked at the cornerback position. It's not like they desperately need a corner. Michigan desperately needs a guy to come in and fill Will Johnson's shoes, right? You got Jane Sanders, who's a top 247 prospect out of the state of Texas. If you pair him with Shamar Earls, that might be one of the best cornerback classes I've seen since I've been on this beat, Sam. I mean, those are a dynamic 1-2 punch. You can lock down both sides of the field, and the opportunity to come in, play early right away is super, super intriguing. And as you mentioned, his relationship with Lamar Morgan, I think, is a big deal. And I know I've gotten asked a bazillion times about Bryce Underwood, but it kind of, the point I'm going to make is he knew going into this trip, if he makes this trip to Michigan, that's going to raise a lot of red flags. And people are going to say, he made that trip, right? If he shows up, he knows there's going to be photos taken of him. He knows people are going to see him on the field. He knows what's going to come after it. And so for him to make that decision, and on top of that, he stopped by the radio show, right? Like he didn't have to do any of that stuff. He didn't have to, but he decided to. I think that speaks volumes on where he's at with Michigan.
Yes, he did stop by the radio show with Andrew Marsh. Appreciated him doing that. It did. It said a lot. It should have said a lot to everyone that he decided to do that. They're like, "Hey, wow, it's boy Sam, you put a lot of pressure on." I did not. He didn't have to come to the radio show, right? He didn't make him come. Said, "Hey, would you like to come by the radio?" Said, "Yeah, sure." It's an unofficial because it's an unofficial visit. Those guys can come by. They came by 3 hours before the game. So before they start on their unofficial visits with the team, they can do what they want to do, right? It'd be different if they were on official visits. They couldn't have come by, but because it was an unofficial visit, they could drop by and hang out for a minute and talk about it. And you saw that Andrew had his recruiting hat on, and was very clear that, yeah, I'm trying to get him in the fold. I'm trying to make it happen for the Maize and Blue. And so it was good to see. It was good to see those guys kind of make it on by and see if Andrew can have some effect and see if he can get him in the fold and make him be a Wolverine. So we'll see if they can make it happen. And that's those two guys. Andrew, for those who are watching, I know some folks listen to us on the podcast, but for those who are watching us on the stream, you see Shamar Earls on the left and Andrew Marsh on the right, making it over to the countdown to kickoff. So that was really cool to see. And that ought to be very telling, right? If a guy is making it by, right, Steve, the pregame show, he's taking it all in. That guy's really, really feeling it. Really feeling like this is, to me, like this is feeling pretty good about the place. That's how I took it anyway.
Yeah, I agree. So I just took a look. In the last two classes, Georgia has signed 7 4-star cornerbacks. One of them, Ellis Robinson, was the number 2 player overall in the country. Also, this would be kind of a little bit of a revenge deal for Michigan. You think about guys like Chris Peel, Daniel Harris, Andre Evans. I mean, those are all guys that at one point or another who ended up signing with Georgia are still on their roster, are guys that Michigan was really, really after big time, and in a couple of cases may have led. And Georgia came in late with, I believe, Peel for sure. And then I think Evans also. I think Evans was committed to LSU and then went to Georgia. But either way, to flip a guy back from Georgia would be just significant for Michigan, just because, yeah, like Brice said, and as I noted, with all the corners they've signed, Michigan needs a corner a lot more than Georgia does right now, but also at the same time, probably from a perception standpoint, looks good to flip a guy of Shamari's caliber, from a program like Georgia, who, again, they have a lot of corners, but they've put out a lot of defensive backs, right? So, I mean, it's not like they're just recruiting good corners; they're producing them too in the next level. So, big win for Michigan in a lot of ways, as long as they pull it off.
Yeah, as long as they pull it off, they got to close it. But they're looking really, really good. I mean, it says something when the Georgia guys start to flip them. It's one thing when I crystal balled them. It's funny. So I crystal balled them before his, I mentioned his visit, and crystal balled them when announced his visit. Because look, when his visit was locked in, he's going to go through all the trouble to visit and everything they went through to get him to not visit. It's like, okay, that says a lot right there. I think he's coming. They were like, no. And then when he didn't commit on the visit, there are a lot of folks, even Michigan folks, like, oh, well, they're not going to get him. They're not going to get him right. A lot of doubts. Even when, you had even some of the national folks were getting a little flimsy. You got to give it to Brian Doan. Brian Doan was like, nope, I'm still hearing he's going to go to Michigan. He dropped his crystal ball after that. But even some Michigan fans started to get a little flimsy. I said, no, I'm still feeling good about that crystal ball. Georgia was still working them hard, but now even the Georgia folks are like, no, not feeling good about it. Feeling like he's gonna flip, and they put it in for Michigan. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes, but it's looking pretty good for the Maize and Blue. And so we'll talk more DB recruiting. But I know you got a scoop, and Brice, I think, has already scooted. Brice has already scooted out. So we'll get Brice already scooted out. So we'll get into some DB recruiting, remaining DB recruiting now, Steve, as we move on from talking about one Mr. Shamar Earls, as we get him off the screen at the moment, because Shamari is not the only DB that we'll be talking about here. There'll be another DB, one Mr. Grayson Littleton, another corner anyway. Grayson Littleton is a ball player. Grayson Littleton committed to Clemson, but Grayson Littleton going to be on Michigan's campus this weekend, and Grayson Littleton is an absolute ball player, and one that I think Michigan fans should really, really keep an eye on, because I think it's significant that he's making this visit to Michigan this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, defensive back recruiting has become exciting, crowded. I mean, there's a lot of names in the pot right now, right? I mean, it is defensive back recruiting. I know at least when Steve Klinkska was there, is like maybe one of the quieter positions that Michigan was recruiting. They'd end up with guys and stuff, but the actual process was maybe a little bit uneventful in some cases. This cycle for defensive backs has been crazy. I mean, you already have Ivan Taylor, Jaden Sanders, Kanoa Winston committed. All three are elite. All three are either within the top 100 or just outside the top 100, right? They're still in on, you mentioned Littleton, who's been kind of quiet since he committed to Clemson. Clemson very strict with their verbal commitments, right? That's something Dabo's maybe the only guy left that does some of this stuff. I think even Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman have kind of given up on the commits can't visit other programs stuff. So the fact Michigan's even in this one to begin with is huge. You still have, I mean, I even know I saw Brian Doan report this morning, it's not for sure that Brandon Finney has flipped to PSU. It sounds like Michigan is still maybe involved in that one. And then you had the in-state kids, Alex Graham, Elijah Dotson, who we talked about Dotson last week as a guy where if I'm Michigan, I'm telling him, we'll just figure out where we play. We love you at 3 or 4 different spots. We'll just get you on campus and figure out where we can play you. That would keep some doors open at other positions. And then, Jordan Young, the kid out of North Carolina, right? Who,
yeah,
for what, couple months was like, okay, Michigan took their shot. He's either going to go to Clemson or NC State, though. He wants to stay close to home. Well, then all of a sudden he ends up on campus last weekend, and it's like, all right. And now he's deciding on Saturday. And it's Clemson, NC State, and Michigan. And I know in checking around today, I guess there's like nervous confidence on Clemson's end that it's going to be them. I mean, would be crazy for Michigan to kind of pull that one off as well, because again, they looked like a clear third as of a few months ago. So yeah, honestly, it'll be fascinating to see where the chips kind of fall as far as defensive backs go, because there's a lot of possibilities out there for Michigan. And man, I mean, I'm of the school, you strike while the iron's hot. If you can land maybe one more guy than you were planning on taking, but if it's an elite guy, you got to take him. You can't skip out. You can't save for next cycle, blah, blah, blah. You got to move in.
Yeah. So with Littleton, I think much like with Shamar Earls, for Shamar Earls to visit, given the fever with which Georgia tried to get him not to visit, it was very significant that he took the visit anyway. Especially given how much he liked Michigan to begin with. Now that was one of the things that led me to believe like a flip is in order. Like he loved Michigan when he came on a visit before, so much so that I was feeling like he was really trending Michigan's way, and I was really feeling like leading into the talk of him taking this visit last weekend, that the talk was so strong that by the time the visit was locked in, by the time he said he was taking the visit, I was like, oh, if he takes the visit, I'm gonna predict that he's gonna go to Michigan. Because he's gonna, if he takes the visit, I think he's gonna come. That's why I'm so confident. Now, I'm not ready to say that Grayson Littleton, as we put some of his highlights on the screen real quick, I'm not ready to say that he's gonna come. But it's noteworthy to me, Steve, given how strict they are, because they have a strict no visit policy. That's Dabo, strict no visit policy. Like, I haven't heard anything about him. There's nothing that says he's decommitted or anything, but they're like, you're not committed if you visit someplace. So again, I'm not saying he's decommitted. Okay, I'm not. Folks, don't take me saying this. This is not me reporting he's decommitted. I'm just saying Clemson's policy, Steve, right? Isn't that their policy? You visit someplace else, you're not committed here. That's typically how they operate. So he at the very least is taking a risk, right?
Yep. Well, it's why they only have 13 verbal. Like Clemson, you remember if you follow national recruiting closely, Clemson is and like, I know Stanford doesn't prevent kids from visiting. Theirs is academic related, but Clemson always fills up super late because they are so strict about that policies. Like they will literally not take a commitment from a kid if they still are bent on taking visits elsewhere. I mean, I think it's something they sit down and tell them, like, are you 100% sure you don't want to take any more visits? If the answer is no, then they'll say, well, then we'll wait for you. We'll keep recruiting you. So yeah, they only have 13 verbals right now. They're also very strict about even just the amount of offers they put out. They are maybe one of all the major programs in college football, they have by far the most old school approach to recruiting. It works sometimes, but sometimes it kind of backfires. I don't understand how you can tell kids nowadays not to visit other schools. I think it's a really outdated, aim and angle that you take on the recruiting trail, but whatever. So up to schools like Michigan and whoever else to take advantage of it. So
yeah, I'm right there with you, Steve. I love this kid's tape. I think he is an absolute ball player, super quick, really fast, cover corner extraordinaire. I think he is outstanding, and again, very noteworthy that he's taking his visit. Again, I'm not as bullish on saying I'm not ready to project him, crystal ball him, or anything. But you got to feel really good if you're Michigan that you got him on campus. Based on what he has to be risking just to do so. So, if you're rolling the dice, if you get Shamar Earls, now you look at the other corners. You got him. Alex Graham is out there, like you mentioned, Steve. You know, you're playing. You got one other spot, and Brandon Finney, as you mentioned, you got a little leverage play, right? If you get Shamar Earls in the fold, you got one other corner spot open with three other guys that you can kind of play. Hey, first come, first serve, fellas. Who really wants it? That's a good position to be in, to me, if you're Michigan.
100%. I mean, man, because Finney, I don't know if you saw the play he made last week. It was kind of made its rounds on Twitter. I'd have a hard time saying no to two of those three, to taking two of those guys if they really wanted in. But yeah, I know there's only a limited amount you can do. And not to mention, yeah, Shamar Earls is elite. Jaden Sanders continues to rise. He's just outside the top 100. I think he is a top 100 player. I mean, when we saw him in person, Sam, he's 6'3". I don't care what anybody says, right? He's listed, I think, at 6'1" or 6'2". He is all of 6'3". And Earls, I believe, is what, 6'2" himself?
At
right?
least.
Yeah. I mean, so they're getting, yeah. So, but no, I mean, it definitely, that's where I'm just fascinating is like, you kind of feel like they're going to end up with one of those guys. Who will it be? I mean, that's where it gets kind of interesting. And the logistical part of it is like, how does the staff go about if all three want in? I mean, obviously, I guess you say yes to the one that you're the highest on, but feel like especially, and Alex Graham had a really great senior season. But I think Littleton and Finney are like 5-star type guys. How do you're kind of splitting hairs in trying to pick one of those two guys over the other. So
yeah,
fascinating.
Yeah, whoever wants to come in my wild card to kind of segue. Look, Elijah Dotson. This is why Elijah Dotson is such a program take ace in the hole, because Elijah Dotson can be a safety. Elijah Dotson can be a receiver. Elijah Dotson can maybe play. It's debatable, right? I don't know, Steve. Like, I got into this debate with a guy. I went out to the Belleville game last week, and we're going to segue. We'll finish up talking about Bryce Underwood because everybody wants to talk about Bryce Underwood, and we're going to talk about Bryce. We got into this debate with a guy about whether Elijah could play corner. I'd give it a shot because I think he's a fantastic athlete who might be able to be a heck of a corner. You give it a shot. He could be a catch-all because, frankly, you don't know what's going to happen with Ivan Taylor. I'm feeling pretty good about Ivan, but has Ivan completely closed the door on Alabama? Has he shut it all the way? I don't think he shut it all the way, Steve.
Right.
And do you know for sure? Do you know you're going to get Jordan Young? I mean, you're feeling good about Jordan Young, but do you know you're going to get Jordan Young?
I just tell him, I mean, he's too, like, as you said, Sam, I mean, a guy that's that athletic who also excels on both sides of the ball at the high school level. It's just, that's the kind of guy, like, so you just take him and you basically say, well, what position you want to try first? Right? We'll run you out there. Like, if he says receiver, all right. I mean, Michigan needs receivers too, right? Why not if he's in the boat and he wants to take a first run at receiver, go ahead, let him. But then even then, let's say doesn't work his way up or whatever, you still have a 4-star defensive back at the same time as well. You know what I mean? So you can't pigeonhole yourself. You can't take a kid like that and then say, okay, well, we're done at this given position, because you can do so much with him. It allows you to maybe still take one of those other guys that's out there, So fast, another big time prospect.
My fear is, Steve, I'm not saying that Elijah is going to be as good as Sauce. Okay, I'm not. But that my fear is that he'll go someplace and be a ball player. Of that ilk. Maybe not as good, that good, right? But just go someplace and ball out, and you'd be like, you could have had that guy. Like,
between the guys that Iowa snagged and
right,
Avante Maddox at Pitt. I mean, that's probably what they're telling him at Pitt, they're probably saying, hey, we've already turned a Detroit guy into what's Maddox, like an 8-9 year pro at this point? I mean,
come on, man. These DBs, Detroit DBs,
yep.
ball out. They ball out. That's what they do. And do you want to be the guy? Do you want to be the team that could have had another Detroit DB and you let him go by the wayside? You want to do that? I don't think you want to do that. So don't do that. Don't do that. Oh man. Anyway. So he is going to be taking an official visit this weekend, which is a good thing. For not only the defensive recruiting for Michigan, but it's also a good thing maybe for the recruitment of one Mr. Bryce Underwood. Because if you pick up his teammate, if you pick up Elijah Dotson, it can't hurt. Can't hurt with Bryce Underwood. Right. And that's the talk. If you follow Alan True's report, he put up a report yesterday. I want to bring it up now because it was a great piece of reporting by Alan True, who always does a great job when it comes to our national recruiting team. Best around, been doing it for a long time. Definitely when it comes to the state of Michigan, no one does it better. And so Alan talked about how he refuted the report out there that said that Bryce was at the game. There's a report that said Bryce was at the game. Alan said, no, Bryce wasn't at the game, but he said, he in his report, and I'm pulling it up, he said it was rumored that Underwood visited last weekend's game against Michigan State. That is false. 24/7 Sports can report. It was also rumored that members of his camp were there. That is true. We can confirm. So again, Bryce wasn't at the game, but members of his camp, as Alan could confirm, were at the game. So it highlights the activity that has been going on, not just last week or the week prior, but has been going on for a long time in this recruitment. And so there's been a lot of misinformation with the Bryce Underwood recruitment, Steve, that would make you believe that this is a sudden dalliance. It is not. Michigan has been burning this candle in this recruitment, as well you should. You can't have the number one player in the country 20 minutes down the road and not be shooting your shot, right? You gotta recruit this guy till the bell. You have to. And it's over when he shows up in Baton Rouge. That's when that recruitment is over. No matter what he says publicly. No matter what he says, I mean, he could say to you, I'm good. He could be saying to you, I'm good today. He's like, I don't want to hear from you guys anymore. You keep talking to him until he's on the plane and he's reporting for school. That's how a recruitment like that goes. But fortunately, that's not how that recruitment has gone to this point. There has been some receptiveness to him or to them. And part of that receptiveness, I think, coincides with going back to last year or earlier this year when we had the reporting that talked about how the NIL landscape at Michigan had changed. Remember how I was talking about there was a before the national championship and after the national championship, I was standing on the table saying, hey, man, look, this approach that they were applying to, like, for instance, to J.J. McCarthy, this will not stand. And then after the national championship, they went and they took care of all their guys. And all those guys came back and said, okay, this is more like it. And you see that has been sustained, and it's just been a new day. And you see how that was applied in the portal. You see that approach being applied with the collective in recruiting and whatnot. So Michigan is much more competitive And what I can say unequivocally, Steve, and you tell me if you have taken note of this as you in your recruiting coverage, Michigan is not an afterthought when it comes to competing with the Oregons, the Alabamas, the Georgias. They're not automatically excluded from these recruitments by virtue of NIL anymore. Those days are over. And specifically as it relates to this recruitment, when it comes to NIL, I can say with great confidence that it will not come down to NIL. Michigan will not lose this recruitment as a result of NIL. Okay. I can say that quite confidently. Quite confidently.
So I guess it feels like, I mean, you're seeing Jaden Rashada sue Florida. You're seeing Miami's main guy. It's like it felt like Michigan kind of made the long play with NIL here in their recruiting in general to make sure that all their ducks were in a row before they made a major run at a guy like Bryce Underwood and whoever else, right? I mean, there's so many hoops and loops and stuff that these schools have had to jump through, but many aren't doing that. Many are just going all out without even really knowing whether or not the backing will actually be there at the end of the day. So for Michigan to be a competitor in that field, to me, says, given the way we've kind of seen it play out a little bit slower than maybe fans maybe wanted it to me, that says Michigan can stand on two legs when talking to kids about NIL, saying this is what we can offer you. There won't be any empty promises, I feel like, on Michigan's end as far as this goes. And I mean, in today's thing, feel like as long as the prospect and their camp are educated, I mean, I think that's one area where Michigan can really start to take advantage, because I mean, they're like you talk about Oregon, there's other schools there that have are shooting cannons, at kids and stuff. But you also see it when you see some of the visitors lists, like this weekend's visitors list. I'll give you another example. I did not expect 26 tight end Brock Harris to be on campus this weekend. 5-star. He's ranked the second tight end in the country. I think he's the top tight end in the country. I mean, again, that's a kid who's visited Oregon a few times, if you understand where I'm kind of going with that. It's like Michigan is competing in those areas to entice kids, to give them their plan, show them what they can offer in that area. Because again, that's the reality at this point, right? I mean, there's no BSing about it. And so yeah, what Michigan, the way Michigan has sort of played it, the way they've played it, I think is really probably going to end up benefiting them more in the long run. And if you're just to go head over heels into it without really any guidance, any education on the situation, so.
Yeah, so they clearly are trying to line some things up, which, we can't get into all the details of the things that some things that we know, some things that we clearly don't know, some things that we're privy to that that are sensitive, that we can report as they unfold, right? So we won't violate confidences, so as not to affect things. We don't want to do that. But if they do unfold, I think it could spark some things. It could spark some things, and maybe get the ball rolling for Michigan. We'll see. We'll see. Get the ball rolling in the way they want this to unfold. For Michigan, I think the NIL is people. It's not going to come down to NIL. I think it's to the point with Bryce Underwood. If you're looking for sort of the nutshell piece on him, I think it has gotten to the point where the NIL is there. So it's not going to come down to that. Like that's not what this is going to come down to. His camp is not. They're not talking. Now I've spoken to his agent, and the message is we aren't doing any interviews. We aren't giving out any commentary. If there's something to say, I guess the only thing to say is it's not really about NIL. And I think the reaction from the people would be like, yeah, right. Well, really, I don't think that, as cynical as you might be in your reaction to that. First of all, I know the dude saying it. Like I've known him forever, and it's really not that outlandish. His point is not outlandish, and here's why. What's outlandish was the report that said, if Michigan's offer is on par with LSU's. That's outlandish, because an on par offer, if it's me, wouldn't even get my attention. Why would an on par offer get my attention when I've already chosen that school? You would have to do something more to get my attention, right? So assuming that you did something to get my attention, okay, now you got my attention. Okay, so you got my attention enough to get me to look at you, meaning that something significant is on the table. I'm looking at you. That package is pretty good. Everything that you're offering is pretty good over there. Financially, it's right. Not about the money anymore. Right? So he said, clearly it's not about the money.
Well, if that's a factor that's even, then there's got to be the other separating factor. Yeah, no, it really, that's what, kind of ironic in a way, but no, I mean, it makes total sense. If the NIL factor is even close to being even on either side, a little more, a little there, or a little here, a little more there, then it almost kind of negates it. I mean, it still matters, but it does, but it doesn't, it's not going to be the tipping point.
It's not the tipping point now, but if you're Michigan, there's a lot of other things that play. Like if you're Michigan, you look at the things that they have, and I went over this to check out. There's a lot of great reporting over on the MichiganInsider.com. Great report from Alan. I got a lot of other details in a piece that I put up. That it's all the other things. So they have things. He has a great relationship with Joe Sloan. I mean, I think that's the best thing to me, that they're his childhood fave. He grew up an LSU fan. He's mentioned that ad nauseum, right? They have a couple Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks, but the best thing they have going for him is Jaden Daniels. They actually coached him. They didn't coach Joe Burrow. They actually coached Jaden Daniels, right? The offense throws it around the yard. How long would Joe Sloan be there? That's actually working against them. So, that's a big deal. But then if you're Michigan, you think about it, head coach to head coach, who would you rather be around? You got that going for you, right? Right. Who would you rather be around? That's easy. All the other things with Michigan, like that really is going for Michigan. Like really is going for Michigan in a big way. In a big way.
Well, remember that LSU offered Elijah Dotson about a month and a half ago. You remember, right? And then I remember thinking, like, the timing. I was like, that's interesting timing on that offer, and no other regional offers for LSU around that time period. I remember thinking, okay, that definitely is going to maybe raise some eyebrows to anybody who's paying attention to the bigger picture. So
they're playing. Right? They're trying to play chess as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see. But listen, follow us. Follow us over on MichiganInsider.com. Next couple of days, definitely into the weekend. There are going to be some things to track. LSU sending their staff up to the Belleville game tomorrow. That's significant. Part of their chess play. And then let's see how things develop after that. Let's just pay attention. We'll see how things go. All right. And keep it locked over on the Michigan Insider. That's going to do it for us on this edition of the Michigan Recruiting Insider. Much more to come. And like I always say, this is a great time to follow Michigan Recruiting. Be sure to check out all the great offerings from our friends over at Wolverine Boots. Great offerings over at Wolverine.com. Great apparel. Our friends over at Wolverine, great supporters of Michigan NIL. Always, always, always. Blue collar work ethic. Blue collar is what they're about over at Wolverine. And we'll see you next time here on the Michigan Recruiting Insider.